Hello, everybody. Then in today's presentation, I'm going to show you how to do namelist and code modifications. Then in the first part of this video, we will review the namelist modifications. And it's something that you did already on the second day of this tutorial. In part 2, we will learn how to do code modification within CSM. And then in part 3, you will have an overview of the exercise. And here I'm borrowing a quote from the matrix that say, I can only show you the door, you are the one who have to work through it. And this is to remind you that you will learn not by only looking at tutorial, but just by practicing and trying stuff on your own. I found this quote was very appropriate here. Okay, first the namelist modification. The first step, I'm going to review the CSM flow, and then I will show you when in the flow you have to do the namelist change. Then I will show you where to find the documentation for namelist variables. And as an illustration, we will customize the output history files to get high frequency output from CSM. Usually you get monthly mean, but we will see how to get higher frequency output. Then this is a slide that you can keep on the side. It's the fourth step, how to build and run the model on Cheyenne. Then first you create a new case, then you go into your case directory, you invoke the case setup command, then you build the executable with the command case build, and then you run your job. You put your job in the batch queue with the case submit command. And as a reminder, this QCMD is for Cheyenne. Only on other machine you don't have you don't have to use this QCMD. Then this is an overview of the CSM directories before you do the command create new case. Then this is something that's on Cheyenne and it's shared by everybody. And you have the CSM code that is into this CSM 2.1 tutorial 2021, and you have all the input data directory. And this is the for command, but this exists already in the machine. These two directory, CSM code and input data, already exist before you do anything. Then your first step is to go into the CSM code directory. Then you go under the subdirectory script. There is a script called create_new case. And then you run the command create new case minus case, the name of your case, the name of your com set, and the resolution. And when you do this, it's going to create a directory, the case directory. That's where you decide to put it. Here I put it into my home, into a subdirectory cases, and my case is called case 01. And it's also going to create the build run directory. And if you look into your case directory, you have a few other scripts, the script case setup, case build, and case submit. Then what you are going to do in the next step is to go into this case directory and first to run the command case setup, then it's over here. And then next you run the case build, and in this case on Cheyenne you have to precede this command by the word QCMD --. And after you run the command case submit, that submits your job to the batch queue. Then this is basically where you are going to modify the name list. You can modify the name list after case setup, as soon as after case setup. But if you have already run the command case build. If you have already built the executable, you can still modify the name list at this stage. And this is the two places where you can modify the name list. And how do you modify the name list? If you look into your case directory, there is a bunch of files called user NL something. And the case setup creates this name list modification file. And this is where you are going to modify your name list. If you look into the case directory, you have also a subdirectory called case docs. And here you have a copy of the name list. Then this is for reference only. You should not edit this file. If you edit it, it will not seen by the model when it's running. And also when you are going to do the command case build or preview name list, it's going to create name list into the run directory. And this is what's going to be used at runtime when the model is running, but it should not be edited either, because if you edit something here, it will be overwritten when you will submit your case. Then basically, this is where you modify your name list into this file called user_NL something. CAM, yeah, for every component, CAM, CIS, CLM, etc. Then now I'm going to show you where you can find documentation for the name list variables. And I'm going to bring you to the CSM2 webpage. Here it is. It will look like this. And this is a little bit small, but it's to point you a little bit in the area you should look at, because there's a lot of information on this webpage. Then you have here prognostic component, or you have also another place, configuration and grid. And this is where you can find information about the name list. Then here I'm going to go into the component, the configuration and grid. And then if you click there on component configuration setting, it's going to bring you on another web page. And you will have name list definition for every component, here for CAM, the atmosphere, for the land model, etc. And if you click on one of these links, for example, CLM 5.0 name list definition or CAM name list definitions, then it's going to bring a window where you will have all the variables that you can find in the name list. And name list variable can change with the version of the model that you are using, that it will also show you which release version you are using and when this HTML was created. Okay, then this is where to find information about the name list variable. And as an illustration, we are going to customize the history file to get high frequency output. Then by default in CSM, you get monthly average history file, but you can output at higher frequency. Then for example, you can go from monthly to daily average. And if you want to do this in CAM, you will use a nameless variable called NHTFRQ, and you will set it to -24. And a disclaimer, in this tutorial, I'm using a lot of examples coming from the atmospheric model. It's because it's mainly, I'm the atmospheric liaison, but the concepts are transferable to other model components. Then I'm going to show you how to change the output frequency, how to put extra variable, how to output extra history file. By default, you get the H0 file, and also how to control the number of time sample that you have in one history file. And basically, all of this can be achieved with these three name list variables. NHTFRQ that set the output frequency. Then we just saw that if you set it to -24, you will get daily instead of monthly. The variable flink, it allows you to add variables to the history file. mfilt is going to give you the number of time samples that are written in a history file. Then this is I'm going to customize the history file here. Then again, we just say that the default output frequency is a monthly average. But I can change this variable called nhtfrq to control the output frequency. Then if it's set to 0, it's the default, it will be outputting monthly average. If I set it to a number larger than 0, it will be the number of time step. Then, for example, if I set it to 1, it will be every time step. And if I set it to a negative number, it will be the number of hours. Then if I set it to -24, it will be daily, every day, every 24 hours. Then there is also another variable called mfilt, and it's going to allow you to control the number of times sample in one file. Then by default, the monthly story file will have only one time sample. Then you will have one file for every month. But you can say, I don't want to have one file for every month. I would like to have 10 months in a single file. In this case, you will set mfilt equal 10. And this is an example. If you output data for 1 year, then to output daily, you are going to set this variable nhtfrq to -24. And if I set mfilt to 365, I will have one history file, a single file with 365 time sample. If I set it to mfilt to 1, then I will have 365 history files with one time sample. And here I don't recommend you do this with the H0 file where you have a lot of output, because you will create a file that's too big to be supported by netcdf. This is just an example. For example, if you want just to output a single level variable, for example, the sea surface temperature, you could do this. But don't try to do this with the full history file H0. Yeah. Then now you can, by default, you have one file called H0, but you can have up to 10 history files that will be called by H0 to H9. Then H0, it contains all the default variable that is necessary to the atmospheric working group package that Adam showed you yesterday how to run. But you can output, then usually I recommend that you leave the H0 file as is if you plan to run the diagnostic package. But then you can add a lot of other history file. And here you have to be a little bit careful because there is an inconsistency. To control the history file will be called H0 to H9, but to control what's the content of the history file, you will use a variable called flink1 for the H0 to flink10 to the H9. And be aware of this inconsistency. And this one is the C notation, and this one is a Fortran notation. And for example, if I put the line in my namelist flink1 equal prect, this is the total precipitation, it's going to add the field prect to the file flink1, it will go in H0, then to the file H0. And also you have an averaging file for the output field. By default, not all, but most of the field, there are some exceptions, but by default, you will output average. There are exceptions for the temperature maximum and minimum, for example, but by default, you will output an average over the time interval. If you have monthly output, it will be monthly average. But you can do average, you can do instantaneous, you can look at the minimum for this, for example, for monthly for this month, or the maximum. Then there's a lot of other flag that you can use. And an example to set, if I use the line fincl equal prect column m, then it will add the minimum of the variable prect, I forgot the t here, to the file h0. Then this is an example. Let's see what happens if we set this in the name list. Then it means that we haven't touched the variable fincl1. Then we are going to still output the monthly history file h0, but on the top of this, we will output a file h1 because we use fincl2, the number 2, and it will output instantaneous value of tquuv. Instantaneous, it's because you have put this column I, and it's instantaneous value. And then you have this nhtfrq. The first one, it's for the h0 file. The second one, it's for the h1. Then it will be -3. Then it means that it's going to be every 3 hours. A minus, we say that when it's a minus, it's counting in hour. And this mfilt, again, the first one, it's for the h0 file, and the second one is for the h1. It means that we will have 8 times sample in each h1 file. Then it means that for every day, we will create a new file. Try it, and I hope this makes sense. And once again, if you plan to run the atmospheric working group diagnostic package, we recommend that you leave the h0 file untouched and to add extra history file with other frequency. And here I'm showing you, I'm not going really to cover this here, but I'm showing you how to do this for the other component. Then for CLM has a nameless variable that are very similar to CAM. There is underscore in front, but you can recognize the NHT, FRQ, mfilt, and fincl. Then this is an example how to output 4 extra history file with daily, 6 hourly, hourly output for this variable. Then have a look, and if you want to have more information about the namelist variable for CLM, you go at this location. You can also access it from the web page, as I showed you in the previous slide. Then this is how to modify to get high frequency output for the CIs. And this is an example how to output daily value for the CIs. And once again, I give you here the location where you can find information about the name list of the CIs. For the ocean, you have to be careful. It's set a little bit differently. Then I recommend that you check carefully the documentation, but this is the variable you would need to output high frequency data for the ocean. And yeah, again, I say it's not standard, and yeah, read the documentation before doing this. Okay, then we reach part 2. Then so far, we haven't touched CSM, we are playing with the name list, but now we are going to dig into code modification. We're going to do very simple code modification, but again, I'm going to borrow a quote for the matrix, and in the matrix, Neo, the main character, is offered to a choice between the red pill and the blue pill, and the blue pill allows him to remain in the matrix, which is a fictional computer-generated world. It's a little bit what CSM is. And the red pill would lead to escape from the matrix, and then you will have to embrace the real world that can be sometimes very painful. And I found it was a slide I borrowed from Andrew Gettelman, but I found that it was really showing well what's going. Yeah, there's a lot of frustration sometimes when you start to do code modification, but it's also the next step, and it's very interesting. Then I'm going to show you where you can do the code modification. And this is again I'm very visual, that I like to have the view of the CSM directories. Then where do I modify the code? Then if you want to do code modification that will be used in every single run you do, you are going to modify into the CSM code. You cannot do this because you don't have permission to do this in the directory. It's what's used by all the students. But if it was in your own directory and you want to do always the same change, you can modify it over here. Now, if you want to do an experiment that you want to compare with another CSM run, then you have subdirectory into the case directory. There is a subdirectory called source mods. And for every component, you have a subdirectory. And this is where you are going to put your code modification. And where do you do your source modification? Then you have to do your source modification before you build the executable. And if you have built already, then you will need to redo this step. And you have always to, after you do source modification, you have always to do step 3, the command 3 and the command 4, build and submit. Yeah, and again, the modification that you do here, as I was saying earlier, it will affect only your current case, while if you put modification here, it will affect every run you do. Then how are you going to modify your subroutine? Then basically here are the steps. The first step is to find the subroutine you want to modify. And it seems very trivial, but it's not always easy. Sometimes it's the most difficult step. Then you have to copy this subroutine I was showing you here. This is the CSM, the vanilla code, the virgin code. Then you will take a subroutine from here and copy it into the source mode directory. Then copy this subroutine into source modes, and you will copy it in the component. If you are modifying a subroutine of the atmosphere, you will copy your subroutine into source.cam, and equivalent if you are doing as a component. Then you do your modification to the subroutine, you just copy here, you compile, you don't forget to compile, and then you run the model. And we are going to do here something fairly simple that often users want to do. What do you need to do if you want to add code to output a new variable? And I'm going to give you an example here. CAM has a field to output the temperature as at 500 millibar. It's called T500. But you don't have a variable in CAM to output at the temperature at 750 millibar. Then we are going to add a field called T750. And this can be done with a succession of calls that's called addfld, called addfld, and called outfld. And the first call is going to add a field to the list of variables you can output. Then this step is optional. It's if you want this to be the default. It means that if you want to add this in every run you do, we will skip this. And then the third step it's now you are going to collect the value for this field and write them in the history file. I'm giving you a little bit the syntax of every variable, and I'm not really to cover this in detail, because the way you are going to do things today, you are going to look at the code to see how it looks and try to add your variable. And it's often a strategy that you will use. You will look at the code and try to make something equivalent. And here, this is the example to add. Yeah, I'm showing you how the variable 7500 is set, and then you will do the same thing for your new variable T750. This is the syntax for the addfld command. You can skip it today, but I leave it here because it could be useful for you for the future. And this is the syntax for the outfld call. And again, you have an example here that will guide you how to do your exercise today. Then where can you find help when you are making code modification or even namelist modification? And here I'm going to point you to the user support forum. Then again, you go to the CSM webpage, and when you don't find the information on this webpage, there is like forum where you can ask your question. Okay, this is the overview of the exercise. Then the first exercise, we will do namelist modification, and we will also customize your output history. Then in the second exercise, you are going to combine a namelist modification plus a code modification. And basically, we are going to add a new output field to the code. We are going to add the field T750. And the third exercise, you will do a change of a tuning parameter. And this is the 3 exercises today. Then you will find the exercise. I didn't put them at the end of this presentation. I put them in another document, and then you can easily go between the two. There will be the exercise, there will be some hints, and also the solution on the tutorial webpage. And a student of the previous year wants to have the solution, then I'm providing the solution in this exercise section. But please don't look at the solution right away, because I'm sure that everybody can do copy paste, and you are going only to learn if you do the exercise by yourself and if you do mistake. Because if you do copy paste, it will work, but it will not teach you much. Then the best way you can learn is to do mistake and ask one of the helper how to do it. But of course, this is my own opinion, and at the end of the day, you just do what's best for you. The solution at the end of this talk, at the end of the exercise section. Okay, this is it. Then good luck with the session today.